In 1950, the average American house cost about $7,400. And it wasn't a shoebox either. You got a full yard, real wood floors, and neighbors who knew your name. Today, that wouldn't cover the down payment on a used shed in most cities. In 1955, a gallon of gas cost 29 cents. That meant $5 filled your tank and left enough change for a Coke and a pack of gum. And you didn't pump it yourself. A young guy cleaned your windshield while calling you sir. The Chevy Bel Air hit the streets in '55, and it turned heads everywhere it went. Two-tone paint, chrome trim, V8 engine. It looked fast, just sitting still. Owning one wasn't just driving. It was showing the world you were doing all right. In 1952, Mr. Potato Head became the first toy ever advertised on television. Back then, you had to supply your own real potato. The plastic spud came later. Imagine handing a modern kid a raw potato and saying, "Here, play with this." In 1950, the U.S. population was just over 150 million, less than half of what it is today. Towns were smaller, streets were quieter, and you could actually recognize most of the faces at the grocery store. America felt big, but not too big. You didn't lock your doors in the 50s, not because crime didn't exist, but because folks trusted each other. If someone knocked, you invited them in. If they didn't knock, it was probably your cousin bringing back your ladder. Nobody worried. It was just different. Sunday dinner wasn't optional. The whole family showed up, grandparents, cousins, the noisy uncle who told the same story every week. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, Jell-O mold no one liked, but everyone took a scoop of anyway. It wasn't about food. It was time. Drive-in theaters were at their peak in the 50s. You pulled up in your car, hooked the speaker onto your window, and watched a double feature under the stars. If you were lucky, the snack bar popcorn wasn't burnt. And maybe she held your hand. The TV dinner was invented in 1953. It came in a foil tray, cost 98 cents, and promised a full meal with 0 dishes. Families loved it, but no one called it processed food. Back then, it was just convenient and kind of exciting. In 1954, the first color TV went on sale, but they were expensive, about $1,000, which is nearly $10,000 today. Most folks stuck with black and white. And when someone in the neighborhood did get a color set, half the block came over. The interstate highway system didn't exist until Eisenhower signed it into law in 1956. Before that, road trips were a real gamble. You needed paper maps, extra tires, and patience. And if your car broke down in the middle of nowhere, well, hope you packed sandwiches. Elvis Presley released his first single, "That's All Right," in 1954. Back then, some folks thought his dancing was scandalous. Too much hip, not enough gospel. But for teenagers, he was electric. He didn't just sing. He shook up the whole country, one vinyl at a time. Milk came in glass bottles on your front step, delivered by the milkman in the early morning. You heard the clink of bottles and knew the day was starting. And if you were lucky, Mom let you peel the little paper lid off before breakfast. Every kid had a red radio flyer wagon or wanted one. It hauled everything, toys, pets, groceries, siblings, whatever. And when it rained, you flipped it over and turned it into a pirate ship, a fort, or a turtle shell. Imagination was the only upgrade. The average American family had one car, one TV, and one bathroom. And yet, somehow, everyone made it work. Siblings fought over the remote, well, the dial, and taking turns wasn't optional. It was just part of growing up. The average annual salary in 1950 was around $3,200. And guess what? That actually went a long way. You could buy a home, raise a family, and still have a vacation once a year. Even if it was just to Grandma's place. School lunches in the 50s weren't pizza pockets and chocolate milk. You got meatloaf, peas, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and a tiny carton of milk. And you ate it without complaining, because the lunch lady looked like she bench-pressed sacks of flour for fun. In the early 1950s, television antennas popped up on rooftops across the country. Families climbed onto the garage with a wrench and a prayer, trying to aim it just right. One turned too far, and you got static. Just right? Crystal clear, I love Lucy. If your mom needed bread in the 1950s, she didn't check an app. She sent you. Grocery stores were small, neighborhood-run, and everyone knew your name. You handed the clerk $1, got a loaf of bread, some milk, and change back. In 1950, most TVs had screens the size of a dinner plate and weighed as much as a small refrigerator. No remote, no pause button. If you wanted to change the channel, you had to get up, and Dad always made you do it. The first Waffle House opened in 1955 in Georgia. It was tiny, cheap, and open 24/7. Truckers, teenagers, and early risers all found a home at the counter. It didn't matter who you were. If you liked waffles and coffee, you had a seat. In 1953, the first successful open-heart surgery using a heart-lung machine was performed. It sounded like something out of science fiction, stopping the heart, fixing it, and starting it again. But it worked, and it changed what doctors believed was possible. House keys were shared with neighbors going out of town. You gave yours to the Johnsons next door so they could feed the cat. No alarms, no cameras, just trust, and maybe a pie waiting on the counter when you got back. Kids in the 1950s played outside. No phones, no tablets, no Wi-Fi, just stickball bikes and coming home when the streetlights flicked on. You knew every kid on your block, and somehow nobody ever got bored. Coca-Cola still came in glass bottles, and the vending machines only took nickels. You slid the bottle out of the cooler, popped the cap, and the first sip practically burned. Cold, fizzy, perfect. No plastic, no zero sugar. Just the real deal. In the 50s, your phone was a rotary dial mounted to the wall. If you messed up dialing the last number, you had to start over. Long-distance calls were a big deal, and if the neighbor picked up on the party line, well, so much for privacy. You didn't need a gym membership in the 1950s. Chores took care of that. Mowing the lawn with a push mower, chopping wood for the stove, hanging laundry outside, hauling water, that was your workout. And somehow your grandpa still had better calves than you. Back then, you dressed up to fly. Men wore suits, women wore gloves. Flying wasn't just transportation, it was an event. You got real meals, legroom, and smiles from the stewardess. And no one ever showed up in sweatpants or tried to bring a goat on board. Back in the 50s, a man's toolbox was a badge of honor. Heavy steel, no labels, just years of grease and know-how. You didn't throw things out, you fixed them. And if your neighbor's mower broke, you didn't call someone. You walked over and helped. Polio was still a real fear in the early 1950s. Kids were told not to swim in public pools during outbreaks. Then, in '55, Jonas Salk's vaccine came out, and it was like the whole country let out a breath it had been holding for years. If your family had a station wagon, you were living good. You piled in the back without seat belts, windows down, dog drooling in the wind, Dad shouting over the radio, and Mom passing sandwiches back from a cooler. It wasn't fancy, but it was freedom. The neighborhood barber shop was where stories were told, hair was cut, and secrets were half whispered under the buzz of clippers. You didn't need Yelp. You needed Lou, the guy who'd been cutting your hair since Eisenhower got elected and still charged $2. There was no GPS. If you got lost, you stopped and asked for directions, and someone actually helped you, usually with a pencil and a napkin. You trusted strangers, and somehow they didn't steer you wrong just for laughs. When the ice cream truck rolled down the street, kids didn't just smile, they sprinted, barefoot, quarters in hand, screaming for bomb pops and drumsticks. No one cared about sugar content, just that first bite, half melted, sun on your face, and sticky fingers all afternoon. Back then, high school shop class meant you actually learned something useful. Welding, woodwork, engines, the good stuff. You didn't just graduate with a diploma. You left knowing how to fix a lawnmower, build a table, and patch a hole in the roof if needed. In 1951, the first nuclear power plant went online in Idaho. It didn't light up a city, just 4 light bulbs. But it was the spark of something massive. America believed the future was atomic, and somehow that was both exciting and terrifying. Toasters, blenders, waffle irons. In the 1950s, these weren't just kitchen tools, they were shiny symbols of progress. Chrome everything. Your appliances looked like they belonged in a spaceship. And if something broke, Dad opened it up and fixed it with a screwdriver and grit. Back then, kids didn't wear helmets when they rode bikes. No elbow pads, no foam suits. Just scabby knees and streamers on the handlebars. You crashed, you limped home, and your mom slapped on iodine like it was holy water, and somehow you survived. Television signed off at night. Around midnight, the screen would go black after the national anthem. No late-night shows, no infomercials, just static. That was your cue to hit the hay, or risk Dad waking up and yelling, "Turn that damn thing off." In the 1950s, car keys were optional. Many pickups didn't even have a door lock. You parked, left the keys under the visor, and nobody touched it. Today, you need a password to start your microwave. Back then, trust was stronger than tech. If you got sick in the 50s, you didn't Google it. You called the family doctor, and he actually came to your house. With a black bag, a thermometer, and a look that said, "I've seen worse." And somehow, his presence made you feel better already. Penny candy actually cost a penny. Tootsie Rolls, Mary Jane's, bubble gum, all lined up behind the counter in big glass jars. You handed over 5 cents and walked out like a king. It wasn't just the sugar. It was the thrill of choice. At home, the thermostat didn't change much. You put on a sweater in winter, opened a window in summer, and complained exactly once before Dad said, "It builds character." And you believed him because you didn't want to be called soft in front of your siblings. Sunday morning radio was for gospel and news. No scrolling, no playlists, just voices on the air and the sound of bacon frying in the background. Dad read the paper, Mom made coffee, and the world felt slow, in the best possible way. In the 1950s, most milk, butter, and meat came from nearby farms. Grocery stores didn't need 20 brands of everything, just one that worked, and nobody asked if something was organic. It was. That's just how food was supposed to be. Cigarette ads were everywhere, on TV, in magazines, even at the doctor's office. Some brands even claimed to be good for digestion. It sounds crazy now, but back then, lighting up was just part of life. Even your boss smoked at his desk. Kids respected their teachers, or at least feared their rulers. Discipline wasn't up for debate. You stood when called on, said, "Yes, ma'am," and you didn't talk back unless you wanted your ears boxed and a note sent home, which you did not want. You didn't throw things out. You fixed them. Radios got new tubes. Shoes got new soles. Toasters got rewired. There was pride in keeping things running, not because you were cheap, but because you could. And when something finally broke for good, you mourned it. A man with a briefcase and a hat was just part of the morning scenery. He kissed his wife goodbye, caught the 8:15 train, and worked downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And every evening he came home like clockwork, tired but proud. The Jell-O salad was in its prime. Lime Jell-O with cottage cheese, fruit suspended in midair like it defied gravity. Maybe some shredded carrots tossed in for texture. Nobody liked it, but everyone ate it, because it was polite. And, well, it was just tradition. When neighbors had a baby, everyone showed up with a casserole and a hand-me-down crib. No baby registries, no online wish lists. Just people helping people. The new dad was expected to hand out cigars, and the new mom didn't leave the house for a week. Roller skates had metal wheels that sounded like thunder on the sidewalk. You tightened them with a skate key that hung on a string around your neck. And if your toe clip broke mid-ride, you walked home barefoot with bloody socks and a big smile. Every diner had a jukebox, either at the table or by the door. Drop in a dime, pick a number, and watch the gears whir to life. Chuck Berry, Patsy Cline, or Buddy Holly came crackling through the speakers, and suddenly the whole booth was quiet. Paperboys were real hustlers. Up at dawn, slinging heavy canvas bags over one shoulder, tossing papers with terrifying accuracy. Rain or shine, no excuses. And if you wanted to make money as a kid in the 50s, you didn't stream or sell candy bars. You delivered. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite ever sent into space. It was the size of a beach ball and scared the hell out of America. Suddenly, the space race was on, and kids in the U.S. started hearing the word science a lot more at school. The average movie ticket in 1950 cost just 48 cents. For under $1, you got a seat, popcorn, and maybe a cartoon before the film. You didn't pre-book. You didn't scroll through trailers. You just showed up and picked whatever was playing, and it was usually great. In 1953, DNA's double helix structure was discovered by Watson and Crick. Most folks didn't understand what it meant at the time, but it would go on to change science, medicine, and even solve crimes decades later. Back then, it was just a strange thing in a science journal. You could buy a brand new Ford F-100 in the early 1950s for under $1,500. No touchscreens, no Bluetooth, just steel, an AM radio, and a bench seat wide enough to fit 3 grown men and a dog. And if you broke it, you fixed it yourself. The Korean War began in 1950 and lasted until 1953. Over 1.7 million Americans served. It wasn't talked about as much as World War II, but it changed thousands of families forever. For many veterans, it was a brutal, cold, uphill fight, and one they rarely spoke about afterward. Most American homes didn't have air conditioning in the 1950s. You cooled off with a fan, a cold glass of lemonade, and a nap on the porch. And if it got really hot, you slept in the basement. Nobody complained. It was just part of summer. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a movie star, she was the movie star. In 1955, she founded her own production company, rare for a woman at that time. To some, she was a blonde bombshell, but behind the scenes, she was sharp, ambitious, and didn't play by Hollywood's rules. Most homes had one bathroom, and it was usually pink, mint green, or baby blue. The toilet, the tub, even the tile, all pastel. And if you had 3 kids in one tub, bath night was a military operation. Oldest first, youngest last, same water. In 1958, the microchip was invented. At the time, no one outside a lab cared much, but it laid the groundwork for computers, phones, and just about everything we use today. Back then, people were still more amazed by the automatic garage door. American Bandstand debuted nationally in 1957, hosted by a clean-cut guy named Dick Clark. Teens danced in saddle shoes and poodle skirts, while parents frowned from the kitchen. It wasn't just a music show. It shaped what cool looked like across the whole country. If you wanted to cool off in the summer, you didn't head to a luxury gym. You went to the community pool, if your town had one. Chlorine strong enough to bleach your hair, lifeguards with zero patience, and somehow every kid still cannonballed right into the deep end. In 1958, the hula hoop hit shelves and sold 25 million units in 4 months. Kids spun plastic rings in driveways, parks, and schoolyards until they were dizzy. Neighborhood contests popped up overnight, and parents secretly tried it after dark, usually throwing out their backs with a smile. Homemade ice cream wasn't just a treat. It was an event. You poured in rock salt, cranked that heavy metal handle until your arms gave out, and prayed it set right. And when it finally did, coldest, creamiest thing you ever tasted. Nothing from a store could touch it. Rock and roll didn't just appear, it exploded. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis, they didn't sound like anything else on the radio. Parents panicked, preachers warned against it, and teenagers. They cranked it louder. For the first time, music felt dangerous in a fun way. You didn't buy furniture from websites. In the 50s, you went to local department stores, sat on every couch, and probably got offered a cup of coffee. The guy who sold it to you lived 2 streets over. And if something broke, he'd help fix it. McDonald's had just started franchising in the 1950s. The original menu had 9 items, including a 15-cent hamburger and 10-cent fries. No apps, no delivery. You walked up to a window, paid in coins, and ate your burger on the hood of your car. And it was perfect. House calls from salesmen were common. Vacuums, encyclopedias, brushes, you name it. These guys wore suits, smiled big, and gave live demos in your living room. Sometimes Mom bought something, sometimes she didn't, but she always offered them coffee. It was just the polite thing to do. In 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state. For many Americans, it felt exotic and far off. Beaches, volcanoes, hula skirts. Suddenly, postcards from paradise started showing up in mailboxes across the country. It was America's newest state, and everyone wanted to visit. Typewriters clacked away in every office, school, and home study. You messed up? You used whiteout or just started over. And there was nothing quite like the sound of someone hitting return. That loud ding and slide that meant they were in the zone. On Halloween night, kids didn't buy costumes, they made them. Old bed sheets, cardboard robots, soot on the face for a cowboy beard. You walked from house to house with a pillowcase, no parents in sight. Just kids, candy, and a night that felt like magic. In the 1950s, TVs didn't come with stands. They were the furniture. Big wooden cabinets with built-in legs and speaker-cloth fronts. When it broke, Dad didn't throw it away. He called the repairman, who'd show up with a toolbox and a cigarette. Men wore hats. Not for fashion, because that's just what you did. Fedoras, flat caps, even pork pies. You put it on before leaving the house, tipped it when you greeted someone, and took it off indoors. It was automatic. No one questioned it. Women curled their hair with metal rollers and dried it under giant helmet dryers that looked like something from a sci-fi movie. Salons smelled like hairspray, perm solution, and gossip. It wasn't just about looks. It was a place to talk. In 1957, a little-known author named Dr. Seuss released The Cat in the Hat. It was written with only 236 different words to help kids learn to read. It didn't just become a hit. It turned story time into something fun, wild, and unforgettable. Postcards were a big deal. Every trip, even just 2 towns over, meant grabbing a postcard and sending it back home. They cost a few cents and carried a simple message. Thinking of you? People saved them like souvenirs. Some still do. Bank hours were strict. If you didn't get there by 3 p.m. Friday, you were broke until Monday. No ATMs, no apps. Just a passbook, a teller behind glass, and the sound of that mechanical stamp punching your deposit into history. In 1955, Disneyland opened in California. Walt Disney himself walked the grounds on opening day. There were only 18 rides, and the park had major hiccups. including a plumber strike and melted asphalt. But still, it became the happiest place on earth. School desks had inkwells, even though most kids were already using ballpoint pens. The holes stayed anyway, like little fossils from the past. You'd poke your pencil through them during math and wonder how anyone ever wrote with an actual feather and ink. Church on Sunday wasn't a maybe. It was the anchor of the week. Families dressed up, kids sat still mostly, and after the service everyone shook hands and headed home for roast chicken. It wasn't just religion. It was routine. It held the week together. Encyclopedias were how you looked things up. A salesman would come to your door with a full set of Britannica, and your parents would pay in monthly installments. If you needed to write a school report, that big shelf of books was the Internet. In the 50s, lunchboxes were metal and built to survive a schoolyard war. Roy Rogers, Hop-Along Cassidy, or Howdy Doody on the side, and inside, a bologna sandwich, an apple, and maybe a thermos of milk. No one traded their lunch unless it had Oreos. The first credit card as we know it, Diners Club, launched in 1950. It started as a way for businessmen to pay for meals without cash. By the end of the decade, more folks were signing up and forgetting to read the fine print. In 1951, the first coast-to-coast live television broadcast aired. President Truman spoke from the White House, and folks across the country watched it happen at the same time. It was the start of a new kind of connection. One screen, one nation, one moment. Yard games were everything. Horseshoes, jacks, marbles, jump rope, and lawn darts. The metal kind, the ones that could skewer a foot if you weren't careful. Kids didn't need instructions. They made up the rules as they went and played till dark. Canned food was king, Spam, condensed soup, and canned fruit cocktail with one lonely cherry. Housewives stocked pantries like mini fallout shelters, quick, cheap, and shelf-stable. It wasn't gourmet, but it fed a family of 5 on one paycheck and a lot of casseroles. Bar soap was the default. Irish Spring, Lifebuoy, Dial came in cardboard boxes, smelled strong, and lasted forever. Every bathroom had a washcloth and a mystery drawer filled with half-melted pink and green soap chunks that stuck to the sink like glue. Brownie cameras became wildly popular thanks to Kodak. Anyone could afford one. Suddenly, memories weren't just kept, they were captured. Birthdays, beach trips, backyard BBQs, all in grainy black and white. If your finger wasn't in the frame, it was a great photo. Every home had ashtrays, even if not everyone smoked. Glass, ceramic, sometimes built right into the furniture. Guests lit up at the dinner table, in the car, even in the doctor's waiting room. Nobody thought twice. Smoke just came with the scenery. TV shows ended with a moral. Whether it was Lassie, the Lone Ranger, or Father Knows Best, there was always a clear lesson by the end. Be kind. Tell the truth. Don't climb into the well. Simple messages, but they stuck more than you'd think. If your parents bought something on layaway, it meant you didn't take it home yet. You made payments little by little until it was paid in full. No credit, no interest, just patience. And when you finally brought it home, it meant something. In 1951, direct dial long-distance phone calls became possible for the first time. No operator needed. Before that, if you wanted to call across the country, you had to ask a live person to connect you. With direct dial, suddenly coast to coast felt a little closer. Car interiors were metal, not plastic. If you left your Chevy in the sun, the steering wheel could fry an egg, and the seat springs left stripes on your legs. No cup holders, no airbags, just raw steel, sticky vinyl, and a whole lot of attitude. In 1952, the first barcode patent was granted. It looked like a bullseye. Nobody had scanners yet, but the idea of machines reading products, pure science fiction. Took another 20 years to catch on. But it started with a doodle and a dream in a 50s lab. Most homes had one phone number, one corded phone, and zero privacy. If it rang, you ran for it. And if your teenage daughter stayed on the line too long, everyone knew there was no voicemail. There was just hoping they called back. Sidewalk chalk wasn't bought in fancy packs. You made it with whatever white rock you could find. Driveways turned into racetracks, hopscotch grids, and masterpieces that washed away with the first summer rain. And nobody needed instructions. You just drew. Every town had a local soda fountain or lunch counter. You sat on a red stool, ordered a cherry Coke or a grilled cheese, and spun in circles while the waitress yelled your name like she'd known you for years. Because she probably had.